The Denver Broncos offense and Bo Nix, they're looking to capitalize this week as the season opener is here. We'll go through and predict who we think will lead the Broncos offense in all the major categories this season, plus the defensive side of the ball. You're going to get that and a little bit more on today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, Broncos Country? Welcome into another episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks once again to all the everydayers out there in Broncos Country. Thanks for making us your first listen. Subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team every single day, all year long. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports, joined as always by Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantly orange.com. At Broncos Country, it is here. It is game week, and the stakes, everything that happens from here on out, it matters for this team. We're excited to break it all down this week and really to kick off today's episode of the show because it is game week. We're going to go through and we're going to look at some statistical production previews for this upcoming season here for Denver. Who's going to lead Denver in special teams production in terms of special teams tackles, things along that line? Who's going to lead the Broncos defense in sacks, forced fumbles, interceptions, things like that? And we're going to start things off with the offensive side of the ball. Who will lead the Broncos offensive production and rushing yards, receiving? There's so much to get into here on today's episode of the show, which is brought to you by our friends over there at PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. PrizePicks, run your game. And speaking of running the game, Sarah, game week is here. The moment we've been waiting for since the NFL draft, since free agency is, okay, hey, how is this 2024 Broncos team going to come together? Now the 53-man roster is set. We have a really good idea. Okay, hey, this is a young team that Sean Payton thinks can be dangerous. Now it's game week. It's here.
It is. Finally, we're at long last. We are finally here to game week where we're talking about real football. And I know the Broncos haven't been necessarily discussed in the most positive light all offseason by national media and things like that, but it's still an exciting beginning to a new era, right? We've talked about this before, but obviously Bo Nix, the first rookie quarterback to be starting a week one game for the Denver Broncos since John Elway back in 1983. And technically, because John Elway was technically drafted by the Colts, he's the first quarterback drafted by the Broncos to be starting a week one game as a rookie here. So there's a lot of excitement, obviously, despite national perception of this team, which I think it's building to optimism. Like the excitement of a football season is obvious. Every year we're excited, whether it's Case Keenum or Trevor Siemian, it doesn't matter. We're always excited, but that excitement is morphing. You can feel, Cody, into optimism among this fan base after the preseason that Bo Nix just had. And certainly you see the development of some of these weapons on both sides of the ball, really in all three phases of the game, as you mentioned, we're going to talk about over the course of the preseason, which makes it even more exciting and the optimism even more brimming. So the expectations, I think, have shifted a little bit in Broncos country.
Well, yeah, we were going to include like, okay, hey, who's going to lead the Broncos in passing yards, passing touchdowns? Well, we're going to assume that's going to be Bo Nix. If it's not Bo Nix, something is terribly wrong. So let's get to rushing yards and rushing touchdowns this upcoming season. Sarah, when it comes to rushing yards, you look at this offense now that has four different running backs here for the Broncos: Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, Audric Estime, Blake Watson, though I don't think he's going to get a lot of carries this upcoming season. That could change. But I look at this, okay, hey, who's going to lead this team here in rushing yards? I went with Jaleel McLaughlin here. I think Jaleel is going to be on a different level this year. And that's not an indication that Javonte is going to have a bad year. I just think that Jalil's got the ability to break off like the 60, 70-yard runs. That's why I think that there's going to be times where he pops several times this season. I've got him leading the team in rushing this year. In terms of rushing yards, who do you have leading for the Broncos?
I'm going to go with the low-hanging fruit and Javonte Williams. I mean, he led the team in rushing yards last year, and that was with the injury kind of still affecting his play. I think we saw that in terms of gaining yardage after contact, and it wasn't a great year for Javonte. But George Payton recently said, you see him out there, it kind of looks like that rookie year Javonte is back. So, Cody, I've got Javonte leading the team in rushing yards as well as rushing touchdowns, which I think that that's going to be a key area of his game. And interestingly enough, he kind of gets a shot to exercise the demons from a couple years ago, where I think we kind of started to notice those red zone issues, the tight red zone, where you would expect a guy like Javonte to be really effective in terms of punching the ball in and maybe getting that touchdown number way up there, like somebody like a David Montgomery or whoever, Jamal Williams, who's able to kind of punch the ball in anytime you get close. Javonte hasn't really been that guy, but I think that does change this year.
You and I are in agreement on that. We both have Javonte listed as the leader in rushing touchdowns for this team, and I think that's a great point too. And I just think that there's a different level of confidence here with Javonte this upcoming season. And I feel like the pressure that maybe he felt last year and the year before, I feel like that pressure is gone. It's kind of off his shoulders, like the way he carries himself, which could be a good thing here for the Broncos. Let's get to like receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. Now, look, this one is going to be very interesting when we break it all down because, okay, we had going into training camp, we're like, wow, Denver's got a lot of receivers. Now we understand what the wide receiver room looks like on the active roster. Certainly, I think changes things a little bit or gives a different perspective. For me, in terms of receiving yards, I'm going to go with Cortland Sutton. I mean, obviously, and I think that's the easy, surefire bet for anybody to say, hey, like if we're going to project anyone to lead the team in receiving, it's got to be Cortland. I got Cortland leading this category here. I'm going to be very curious to see how his connection with Bo Nix starts to develop even further. And I look, even like last year, like with Russ and Cortland, it was mainly the deep shot. It was the down the sideline types throws. Now you're going to start seeing slants. You're going to start seeing the short crossing patterns from Bo to a guy like Cortland. So I'm excited to see that. I think Cortland will lead the team in receiving yards, though he's going to see a lot of coverage attention this upcoming season. Who do you have on your list as you think is going to lead the team in receiving this year?
Well, I'm going to go with Marvin Mims just for the fact that I think, let's pick somebody different, you and I, for this category. I like the Sutton choice. I think what if Marvin's target share increases pretty substantially this year, which I think based on the cut of Tim Patrick now, we kind of have to almost expect. I think we'll see Josh Reynolds get more involved, obviously. Greg Dulcich hopefully staying healthy and taking a target share. But if Marvin gets a hefty increase in the target share, Cody, he's going to probably lead the team in yards per reception and things like that, and average depth of target, things like that. So if he can capitalize on at least 65% of his targets this year, I think he has a decent shot of maybe at least reaching that 1,000 yards, playing that sort of Brandon Cooks type of role, or, other guys that we've seen throughout the years, many other names that you could throw in there for Sean Payton and his offense. So I'm saying Marvin lead the team in receiving yards this year.
All right. All right. And hey, look, Broncos Country, as you're watching, you're listening along, you want to share your thoughts on who you think is going to lead the statistical categories this year offensively. Hey, send them in to us at Cody Roark NFL, at Sayre Bedinger, at Locked On Broncos on social media, or even in the comments if you're watching on YouTube. We always love your thoughts, your picks, your interactions as well. Let's get to receiving touchdowns here. This one is going to be interesting. Now, last year, Cortland Sutton led the way with 10 touchdowns. And really, I think what he was able to do was pretty remarkable. Some of those touchdown catches he had were the degree of difficulty pretty rough when you look at it from a statistical probability standpoint. He found a way, I think, to make the most improbable touchdown catch, I think, in NFL Next Gen Stats history last year. I think it was against the Buffalo Bills, that one, which was incredible. I kind of changed mine up a little bit here. I think Cortland's going to see a lot of coverage attention. And while I think Cortland's going to lead the team in receiving, I got Josh Reynolds leading the team in receiving touchdowns, which I think when you look at that, and I think people see, they're like, wait, if Josh Reynolds is leading the team in receiving touchdowns, is that a problem? I think that Denver's touchdown production offensively, I think, will be spread out this year more so than ever has been. And I think a guy like Reynolds leading the way is not a bad thing, in my opinion, at this. Who do you have?
Yeah, I've got Sutton in this category. I went kind of chalk based on last season, but I do agree with you, Cody. I think that the ball distribution from Bo Nix and Sean Payton, I think Sean has a lot to do with this in terms of like wanting to get everybody involved and having those matchups exploited. It's not like you get down into the red zone, he's like, all right, got to find a way to get the ball to Cortland Sutton. I think he's trying to scheme whoever he can open. So one game it could be Nate Adkins and Michael Burton off the practice squad catching touchdown passes, and the next game it could be Cortland catching 2, and just things like that. So, but I'm going with Sutton. Although I do agree with you that the ball distribution is going to be pretty significant and pretty widespread. I think Cortland will lead the team in touchdowns again this year. Broncos really emphasized keeping him. And we recently found out they turned down an offer to take part in a blockbuster trade to send him off to the 49ers, who were potentially going to send Ayuk to the Steelers. That's a whole nother episode maybe of the show that we talk about sometime. But I think because of that, because they've kept on to him despite the offers, I think we'll see him featured in the ways that he is best an asset to this team.
No, we're excited to see it. Look, Broncos Country, get involved as always in the conversation here. Locked on Broncos. We're going to continue this by taking a look at the defensive side of the ball. Who's going to lead the Broncos defense in interceptions? There's a lot of different options that the Broncos could have in that category here, especially even tackles. Well, Alex Singleton returned as the leading tackle artist for Denver this season. We'll tell you why that might be in danger here on today's episode, Locked on Broncos. Today's episode of the show was brought to you by our friends over there at the Game Time app. And Game Time, they have a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks, they filter out the fluff to only show you the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. That's the promise inside the Game Time app. Game Time, not only do they have Game Time Picks, but they also have all-in pricing, where if you toggle this feature, it shows you your total upfront, so you're not hit with any surprise fees when you go to check out. NFL games are starting up all over the weekend. If you're a Broncos fan in Seattle and you want to go to Lumen Field, go check out the Game Time app to get tickets to see the Broncos season opener against the Seahawks on the road in hostile territory. You can even get a view of your seat inside the app, where you get a panoramic view of the action. If you want to go and just get the ticket to see exactly what your vantage point is going to look like, you get that inside the Game Time app. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp, and kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. What's something you'd like to learn? Gardening, a new language, or maybe how to finally beat your best friend in bowling? Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder, because your back-to-school era can come at any age. Life doesn't come with a playbook or a manual to figure out how to deal with certain things when they come up, and sometimes we're left feeling stuck. In my experience, I've utilized BetterHelp therapy in the past, and I found it very beneficial for me because it was easy. It was convenient for me to be able to fill out a survey, get matched with a licensed therapist within minutes, and then I scheduled my first session. My therapist and I, we vibe really well. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
We're going to tell you why two different players, or at least maybe multiple different players, could end up leading the Denver Broncos in interceptions, sacks, tackles. We're excited to see what this defense has to bring to the table this season. And Cody and I have some predictions ahead of the 2024 regular season on today's episode, Locked on Broncos. But want to say thank you to all of you that make Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. And if you haven't already done so, hit subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, as well as go over to YouTube, join the growing community over there, and sound off in the discussion. Let us know your thoughts and your predictions on the 2024 season for the Denver Broncos. And hey, for your second listen of the day, check out Locked on Fantasy Football. Get ready for the start of the season. Make sure your lineups are ready to go, especially now we got games on Thursday nights again. So you got to be ready, and you got to be prepared for your matchups. And Cody, speaking of being prepared, I think the Denver Broncos are, defensively, they're prepared to have a much better season in 2024 than we saw in 2023. And although that may not sound like much considering some of the worst of what we saw last year, I think that the baseline is somewhere, not necessarily in between the 70-point game against the Dolphins and kind of that heater that they went on of turning the ball over 4 or 5 times a game. But maybe I think the arrow kind of points more towards the team that was turning the ball over. That's more so when you saw the team get healthy defensively and have the right personnel out there. So defensively speaking, let's talk about turnovers. Let's talk about who we think is going to lead the team in interceptions this year, because Justin Simmons, he's gone. He can't lead the team in interceptions, unfortunately, anymore. Who's it going to be here in 2024 for the Denver Broncos?
As much as I'd love to say Patrick Surtain, I mean, the reality of that, I think, is teams aren't going to throw his way as much, right? But I think in today's game, having a guy who can play in the slot effectively well is probably the most crucial aspect of having on your defense. I think that's going to soon shift to be one of the most highest paid players. Like Pat's going to command this offseason or during the season the highest paid cornerback contract ever. But then from that point, you look at slot corners, you look at those cover guys, they're going to get, a nice price tag. Like the Broncos have Jaquan McMillan right now at a very, very good discount. I got Jaquan McMillan going out there and earning an extension here this year. Like he was a big part of that turnover run that they went on last season in terms of intercepting the football, forcing the fumble, recovering fumbles. Like that's exactly where he was at there. So I'm going to go with J-Mac this upcoming season in terms of interceptions. I do think Pat's going to get more than he's had. I think it's time. Like Pat is looking to strap things up, but I got J-Mac leading the way here.
Are we going to see potentially a Champ Bailey type of season from Pat
Oh,
Surtain this year? If they throw the
that
ball
would be
his
nice.
direction, that would be nice. Hey, I would love to see that. And, 10 interceptions, something light for Pat Surtain out there. But no, I think, that's been kind of the challenge, the gauntlet thrown down anytime anybody's been asked this offseason, like, hey, where can, if Pat's the best corner in football, like, where can he get better? Right. And I think we've heard Sean Payton and Vance Joseph and even Pat himself all say, like, that ball production, like they want to see him get his hands on the ball more. I believe he was thrown out about 90 times last year, which feels like a high number considering it doesn't feel like teams really target him all that often during games. So I think we'll see Pat make teams pay this year. He's my pick to lead the team in interceptions and take over that mantle from Justin Simmons. Now, obviously, like you said, Cody, it depends largely on whether or not teams are willing to throw him the ball. If he starts getting interceptions early in the season, if he gets one or two, I mean, teams aren't going to be targeting his side of the field as often. So I think it's going to be, he's got to be opportunistic, but I think we could see Pat Surtain lead this Broncos team in interceptions. What about sacks, though? Because if you're getting sacks, he's going to get more opportunities. Quarterbacks are going to be rushing their throws. The pass rush department this year for the Broncos is one of the most interesting areas of the team this year. Who do you have leading the team in sacks?
Look, I think it's going to be Baron Browning, and Baron has just been on another level this offseason. And look, I think in training camp in the preseason, you're not going to go full speed. Like you're not going to unleash full arsenal just yet. But Baron's got a wide variety of different pass rush moves that I'm excited to see him break out here in the regular season. And so much of it, I think, is going to be like he's bigger. Like he's more bulkier than he was last year, but he's still just as athletic. And I think the one thing you're going to see that's going to help, I think the Broncos additions on the trenches on the interior, I think with JFM, with Zach Allen, DJ Jones, those guys playing right there. And then you have the guys coming in behind those guys in rotation. I think that's going to be a very, very good recipe here for those guys, for he and Baron, Jonathan Cooper and Nick Benito and Jonah Ellis to have success. But I'm going to go with Baron Browning. I think Baron's going to have over 10 sacks this season. I think it could be anywhere between the 11 to 14 range. I know it's going to sound crazy to some people who are listening to this, but just watching it, like if Baron can stay healthy, and this is the asterisk, if Baron can stay healthy, I can see him getting 14 sacks this season and leading the team. But, there's going to be a lot of production to be had there. Who do you have?
I've got Jonathan Cooper right now, and I wanted to just make sure I picked somebody different because I like Baron Browning just like you do. I really feel like he is that type of guy, but I do believe Cooper is capable of leading this team in sacks. And because of the fact that Baron is going to command a lot of attention on the other side, I think especially early on in the season, teams are going to start to see, all right, we kind of got to double team this guy. He's too quick off the snap. And yes, that can get him into trouble at times with the offside penalties, but I think with, like you said, the interior pressure coming from Zach Allen, who's also potentially a candidate. I mean, if you can get 9 or 10, you might lead this team because you're going to, just like the distribution of touchdowns in the receiving game offensively, I think we're kind of talking about a similar deal here with sacks defensively, because who can get there first, or maybe who can get there second more often, because the first guy may not always seal the deal. The second guy that gets there, though, might reap the benefits of the first guy getting there. So I think Jonathan Cooper, he can be both of those guys. He can be the guy to get there first, and he can be the guy that's going to relentlessly chase the quarterback and get him down on the second effort there. In terms of tackles, we got the tackling merchant, Alex Singleton, on this team. Cody, is he the obvious pick here to lead the team in tackles in 2024?
Well, I mean, if if you had to do it on FanDuel, absolutely, he'd be the betting favorite right now for that. I think with what we saw with him in the preseason, I mean, he was all over. Like, he was a man on fire during the preseason in terms of tackling. He led, I think it was the Colts game, he led the team in tackles. He only played 2 series at that point, so it's like, hey,
Sounds about
that's a
right.
cool statistic. And I think with the new additions on the defensive line, he's filling gaps easier without getting blocked by an offensive guard or center that's trying to get to the second level. I think he's going to lead the team in tackles, but I would not be surprised if the guy that you chose is going to end up leading the way.
I'm just the contrarian here, right? Defensively, Cody Barton, I think, has a chance. He's got multiple 100+ tackle seasons in a row. I think that kind of goes overlooked when you talk about
13 games
him.
last year.
Yeah, so he's a candidate for sure, especially if Singleton is, he's gonna be, they're gonna be neck and neck every week. I bet you they're gonna be having an internal competition, those guys, Cody, in terms of like, hey, I'm getting you this week. I'm not letting you get to that guy first. So I think that's going to be a fun competition to watch all season between Singleton and Barton, being those tackling machines that they are. In terms of forced fumbles, you kind of think and feel like this goes in hand with guys that are going to get to the quarterback, but also maybe interior defensive line. This is an opportunity for these guys to, punch the ball out when you get in those scrums with running backs. Who do you have leading the team in forced fumbles this year?
Well, that leads perfectly, right? I got a defensive lineman doing. I got John Franklin Myers, right? And I know some people are saying, "Well, how is that going to be possible? Like, that does that mean he's going to lead the team in sacks?" No, like, to the point you said, I think JFM is going to get several sacks this season. I think several of them will be strip sacks, but I think where he's going to do damage is when he breaks through the line of scrimmage. He meets a running back in the backfield. Like, you wrap him up. I think he's going to try to rip the ball out a few times. I think he's going to end up leading the team in forced fumbles, which would be a good thing. Like, if the Broncos had a player at this category leading in forced fumbles, that's a good thing, right? If it's your corner that's doing it, not usually a good thing. It means the guys are getting to the second level consistently. So I'm going to go with JFM in this situation. Who do you have?
I like Baron Browning. I mean, we talked about it up top with the sacks category. I just feel like I can see him. I can visualize it in my head and all those glorious different new uniform combinations. Number 5 coming from behind and just smacking the ball right out of the quarterback's hands in the blink of an eye. Hopefully in big situations in games like tide turning types of situations. I feel like Browning has the ability to be, up there in the 4 to 6 forced fumble category range in terms of the quickness that he has off the snap. So I'm saying Baron Browning leads the team in forced fumbles this year by way of the strip sack, which, man, we've really needed that since Von Miller, was traded to the Los Angeles Rams.
Well, it's been a while since you've seen that, though. But Broncos country defensively, a lot of exciting names to watch for here in these defensive production outputs. Let us know your thoughts. Yeah, we're going to talk about special teams, too. Can Will Lutz hit more than 27+ field goals here in 2024? We'll tell you why Big Deal Will might be in line to do just that here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by our friends over there at PrizePicks. And PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is you pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. If you want to play PrizePicks alongside Drewski, Joe Budden, and MMA champ Sugar Sean O'Malley, you can now find community plays under the promos tab on the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the PrizePicks community each week. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks, your picks are still live. So check it out today. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, diving deep into the Broncos special teams output. Yes, there are three phases of the ball, and Sean Payton believes, hey, you have to have a good offense. You have to have productive defense. But if you don't have a good special teams unit, you aren't going to succeed. And he's invested a lot of time and energy into Denver's special teams side of the ball. We'll get into all that here. Just want to say thanks once again to everyone in Broncos Country, all the everydayers out there. Thanks for making us your first listen here once again. Appreciate you so much. Let's get into this here. Special teams tackles. Like, this is a different category in and of itself. I think it was last year, 2 years ago, I was asking PJ Locke before he became a star. I said, hey, what's your goal? He said, my goal is to get 15 special teams tackles this year. I think he got to 14. He was one off there in that category here. But in terms of who you think can lead in this category specifically, right? Because you think about special teams tackles, you're going to get a lot of opportunities, but it's also very, very hard to maximize that considering, hey, there's 10 other players that are fighting downfield. So for me, I'm very curious to see what you have to say about this. When you look at Denver's special team side of the ball, who do you think is going to lead the team in special teams tackles, whether it be on kickoff and punt coverage? Because really, those are the only two ones you can do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it used to be, well, at least in recent years, when PJ probably gave you that quote, Cody, there weren't many kickoff return opportunities for teams. Now there's a lot. And so that is going to change the way that teams built their rosters, change the way that, special teams can be valued. And it certainly, I think, made it a huge win that the Broncos were able to. Remember early in the offseason when Justin Sternad, I believe he signed with the Carolina Panthers, or at least had, potentially agreed to a deal with the Carolina Panthers before the Broncos kind of sniped him back. I feel like Justin Sternad is in line to lead this Broncos team in special teams tackles. And specifically, I think we're going to see number 40 making a lot of plays in the kickoff game, because the Broncos, I don't think, are going to be one of those teams that's afraid to kick it in the landing zone, because I believe they're going to be able to trust in guys like Sternad to get down there in coverage and help them win the field position game. So I think Justin Sternad leads this team in special teams tackles.
I like that. I think that's a good pick. And look, just watching the special teams film from the preseason, I like Denver's angles. I like how they're approaching the new kickoff. You mentioned the landing zone. That's going to be big. I'm going to go with Devin Key, obviously the Broncos' number 3 safety. Now, if there's an injury to Brandon Jones, and let's say Devin has to start, then this is obviously going to change that a little bit, because Devin's going to probably not be placed as high priority on special teams at a point, especially if he's starting on defense, considering Denver's safety depth. But he's the personal protector right now on the punt team, and he's also a guy on kick coverage that's going to get downfield. For me, I think he's going to be in line to do it. I think we could make an argument for Tremont Smith, obviously, in terms of where he's at as a gunner. I'm curious to see who the other gunner is going to be opposite of Tremont on punt coverage. That, to me, I think is something we don't know yet. Very excited to see, obviously, on Sunday against the Seahawks, how that's going to play out. But I see Devin Key being that. The next category we're going to get to here, because it's like, okay, hey, how can you diversify the special teams conversation here? Well, let's look at the return game, right? The new rules. Instead of saying, like, who's going to lead the team in production at this category, which should be specifically obvious here, let's change it up a little bit. When you look at the new kick return rules, you look at punt return. Will Marvin Mims have a kick return or punt return touchdown in 2024? This is a very, very interesting one.
It is. I think optimistically, I'm going to say yes to both. I feel like with as many opportunities as kickoff returners are going to get now, that could change. If Marvin has a return touchdown early in the season, teams might just be like, all right, you know what? We're either kicking it to the other side of the field, or we're kicking it through the back of the end zone and not even giving him a shot to return one out there. But I do feel like at some point during this year, we didn't get to see any of it in the preseason. And maybe that's because the Broncos have something schemed up for whenever the Seahawks kick it finally to Marvin. I just feel like we are going to see at least one of each this year from the All-Pro. I mean, that's one of the underrated aspects of Marvin this past season and in his rookie year, is that he made All-Pro as a return specialist. Like, he's very good at it. So I do feel like, Cody, we're going to see at least one of each from him in those two categories.
I've got him having 2 kick returns for a touchdown this season and 1 punt return. I feel like the punt return is probably going to be the hardest. In today's NFL, it is hard. And you see, I think, what was it? The last Bronco who had a punt return for a touchdown, I think, was Deontay Spencer, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably.
Against the Carolina Panthers. It was the Drew Lock, KJ Hamler touchdown game. It was Deontay Spencer, I think, was the guy that had the last punt return touchdown. So it's been a while. Like, it's a hard play to do. So it's like giving him one is still kind of a little risky here, but I think he'll have 1 or 2 total return touchdowns this season. In whatever category it may be, I think it will come here for Marvin. I'm very curious to see who does end up. Part of me is wondering, is it going to be Blake Watson, who's the other return guy opposite of him because of his explosiveness, because of the size he has on, in terms of body makeup in comparison to maybe some other guys. I just don't know who the other return guy is going to be. So we'll see how that one plays out here. Let's get into like big deal Will here. Obviously, Will Lutz got the contract extension, was also a guy who signed away to the Jaguars and then came back to the Denver Broncos. I say, sorry, Sean called me. He threatened me with a good time. So we'll see if that's the case here. Will Lutz, I know it's a little bit of a tongue twister there. Will Lutz make 27 plus field goals here in 2024? I've got him doing that. I've got him saying yes. Where are you at? And also, what do you think he'll go on extra points? You think he'll miss a couple? You think he'll be perfect this season? Where are you at?
Well, in terms of the field goal numbers there, you look at his last 7 seasons and he's hit over 27 field goals in 5 out of the last 7. So 2020 and 2022 were the only times that he didn't do that.
The injury, right?
And make injury. And he only made 23 field goals in those respective seasons. He made 30 last year for the Denver Broncos. And of course, when I think of that 27 number, I kind of think to myself, all right, what does that mean in terms of, are you missing out on a lot of touchdowns if he's making 27? But then you kind of go back to those Saints offenses where Drew Brees was still playing at an elite level and he's making more than 27 field goals at that point. So that, I could see that being the kind of the over under number for sure for Will Lutz. And I'm going to say yes, that he does hit 27 or more field goals this season. As far as missing extra points, man, that is one of my biggest pet peeves, Cody, is when those guys, the kickers who are paid to just all they do, what do they do at practice besides practice extra points and field goals? And I can't stand it. So I hope that the extra points missed is at a bare minimum, if anything.
Yeah, I'm hoping that there's not a single miss. I mean, when you look at it, there shouldn't be. And I understand the NFL changing the rule a few years ago, the way that, hey, we're going to move it back, makes it a little more competitive advantage. It's a chip shot for these guys. Like, not saying it's a chip shot for me, not saying it's a chip shot for you, but for these guys, it should be easy money. It should just be, not like it's not a free throw, because free throws, there's always a percentage you're going to miss that, but this should be an easy chip shot for these guys to be able to do that. So we'll see how it all plays out. And we may revisit this episode down the line, say, hey, like that actually came out pretty well. Like the Broncos produced in this category with these guys, and maybe this guy emerged out of nowhere that we didn't expect. Like that's the fun thing about it. But Broncos country, the other thing that is fun about all this, the Broncos season is finally here. The regular season, week 1 against the Seattle Seahawks, is coming this Sunday. And all week long here on Locked On Broncos, our promise to you is that we're going to get you prepared for that. You got a crossover Thursday episode where we sit down with Locked On Seahawks. We talk about the matchup, what's going on, the key storylines, matchups to watch, things like that. And on top of that, practice is this week. We have you covered with everything that Sean Payton, the players are saying, as Bo Nix builds up to his first season with the Denver Broncos. We'll go deep into that here on today's episode of the show and throughout the entire week. Locked On Broncos. We appreciate you so much. Thanks for making us your first listen. We'll catch you tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.